It's hard to have patience with people who say there is no death or death doesn't matter. There is death, and whatever is matters. And whatever happens has consequences, and it and they are irrevocable and irreversible. You might as well say that birth doesn't matter. As physicians in training, coming to terms with death and finding a way of understanding and coping with it is an especially important part of your training. Every life event we experience, and particularly the painful ones, offers us an opportunity for personal growth. And in the past several days, I've talked with many students as they're dealing with Richard's death. One student, seasoned in the experience of death by many past losses, said things are never the same again, but there's a new reality in which we continue to live. I hope that the new reality for each of us will include the good things that Richard brought to our lives by his example. Certainly we'll remember our interactions with him and the results of his good works. But while we'll miss him, I hope we can use those memories along with the experience of his death to make us stronger physicians who are more available to our patients, especially when they're dying. Death is the great enemy to most physicians, and sometimes this adversarial relationship can cause the physician, without realizing it, to close off and to displace his frustration and anger at death onto the patient who's dying. And it's in this context I'd like to use the prayer of Maimonides, which we have read at the most recent White Coat ceremony in part, but I'm reading some different parts today, to remind us that we must be emotionally available to all of our patients at all times, and not only when we can help to heal them. The dying patient is still our patient. The daily prayer of a physician is attributed to Maimonides, who's a physician and scholar who lived and worked during the Middle Ages. However, it was probably actually written by Marcus Hertz, a German physician and a pupil of the philosopher Immanuel Kant. First appeared in print about 1793, and it's often used during medical school ceremonies. At no time is it more appropriate than now, and Mrs. Dirksen suggested that we read parts of it again to remind ourselves that although Richard has left us in our earthly journey, his memory and his example are still with us and always will be. Almighty God, thou hast created the human body with infinite wisdom. 10,000 times 10,000 organs thou hast combined in it that act unceasingly and harmoniously to preserve the whole in all its beauty, the body, which is the envelope of the immortal soul. They're ever acting in perfect order, in agreement and accord, yet when the frailty of matter or the unbridling of passions deranges this order or interrupts this accord, then forces clash and the body crumbles into the primal dust from which it came. Thou sendest to man diseases as beneficent messengers to foretell approaching danger and urge him to avert it. Thou hast blessed thine earth, thy rivers, thy mountains with healing substances. They enable thy creatures to alleviate their sufferings and to heal their illnesses. And thou hast endowed man with the wisdom to relieve the suffering of his brother, to recognize his disorders, to extract the healing substances, to discover their powers, and to prepare and apply them to suit every ill. In thine eternal providence thou hast appointed us to watch over the life and health of thy creatures. May the love for our art actuate us at all times. May neither avarice nor miserliness nor thirst for glory or for great reputation engage our minds, for the enemies of truth and philanthropy could easily deceive us and make us forgetful of our lofty aim of doing good to thy children. May I never see in the patient anything but a fellow creature in pain. Grant me the strength, the time, and the opportunity always to correct what I've acquired, always to extend its domain, for knowledge is immense, and the spirit of man can extend indefinitely to enrich itself daily with the new requirements. Today, he can discover his errors of yesterday, and tomorrow he can obtain a new light on what he thinks himself sure of today. O God, thou hast appointed us to watch over the life and death of thy creatures. We are ready for our vocation and turn ourselves to our calling. Dr. Senthilkumar, would you like to speak?
Not be one more memorial service. I want everyone here to remember this great man, Richard, from whom all of us have so much to learn from. Richard, I know you're here. Even though the precious life has come to an abrupt end, please listen to all of us and all what we have to say about you, and you will know how much you have accomplished and that you have a big family. In quoting Steve Jobs, who said, "Your time is limited. Do not waste it living someone else's life." I'm sure you all heard these lines. The lines which I most like and love is, he says, and most important, have the courage, underline the word courage, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. Richard had that courage. He was living a life of hermit, and this was his sacred place. We're truly proud some rare qualities in Richard, which every one of us should look upon: humility, hard work. My beloved students will understand this. He was always willing to help, even before being asked for. Richard, you're a rare gem, and in our eyes, you will always continue to shine.
It is a very sad moment for me. I am still struggling to cope with the loss of one of my best friends. Was a regular, with the very few that are admitted regularly in my office, for him to talk about philosophy, history, and many things that interest him. Highly honorable man. A guy in many senses, struggling still to find his own path, but a highly accomplished person at the same time. He's going to be missed, but he will continue to be with us. Be sure of that. He left a lot. On every person that he touched. I tried to write something, but I found myself out of words every time I was trying to put words on that tangled, strange, from one week to the other relation that started to grow since he arrived here. I will never forget. It was the first class I had with him the day one of the national records, the Kitty Wake, was sunk, and he came to explain to me so many things that I ignored about marine life, vessels, and everything like that. So immediately the connection was created. He knew many things about many fields. Right use always, sometimes right use to the stream, ethical, haunted by ethics a lot, by honor. I'm just going to quote a very short thing from Horace, one poet that lived in the age of Augustus I, Roman emperor, non omnis moriar, which means he won't completely die. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hanson North. I was Richard's biochem prof. And I well remember the first time I ever saw him was about 3 semesters ago. I think he was with the anatomy class when I first saw him in his first semester. And I thought that he was a new prof that had joined us. Chap a little bit, just a bit older than the average first semester student might be. But I realized later that, yes, he was a student, and then subsequently came on into biochemistry, and I realized that he was going to sit on the front row, and he was going to listen, learn, and ask a lot of questions. And I loved it, okay? Of course, many times we had to talk about how we have to get off of a fine point and get a little further into the concepts, and he took that to heed, and he went on with it. And later, in my office and other places, I would run into him, and we would have gentlemanly, how shall I put it, older chap type conversations of more of a philosophical nature. And I learned to respect him and care for him. True gentleman. We're all going to miss him, and I'm certain he put him in a great position.
Meyer Robson, Director of Research. Heaven knows the sadness enough if Richard would be leading us on rotation. He was much loved, and a distinguishing feature is I've never seen anybody work so hard to tutor the younger and newly arriving students, and some of the older ones too. I would always find him in the gazebo or the faculty meeting area upstairs or down here. But yet another student poured over a book explaining what he'd learned to understand. And whenever he got to understand something, he would immediately want to go out and teach it to somebody else. I've never seen a student want to do that so much. I was a kind of mentor, unofficially, to Richard, because we had a common passion we discovered. We didn't talk a lot about philosophy too much. Our common passion was information technology and medicine. He was growing more and more interested in what I was doing. We were talking. He was going to join in the research collaboration with a number of universities to answer the new President's Council call for new way to do things in information systems for medicine. And ironically, he was going to be, although we didn't know the time exactly at the time, on the conference call this evening with me tonight to the United States. There were a number of people from universities like Harvard and Stanford will be on that line, planning together the future of healthcare technology. That interest was because he had, of course, a strong IT background. It was a growing interest of his to apply the power of information technology to save lives. And I think he always had in part that vision. I know he wants to be a physician too, an everyday physician, but he grew increasingly interested in that. We spent a lot of time together, much blogging on our LinkedIn group for that very purpose, and a great deal of time discussing those things. I don't think we ever touched philosophy, but we spent endless hours on health.